Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Twinkie Bird, member of Alliance of Women Directors, a nonprofit organization focused on expanding narratives in film, television, and new media by amplifying and advocating for women directors. We are thrilled to be partnering with our friends at Turner Classic Movies to bring you this fantastic conversation about the historic Daughters of the Dust. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome Jacqueline Stewart, co-host of Women Make Film and Silent Sunday Nights on TCM. Hello, Jacqueline. And director extraordinaire, who I love so much, who with Daughters of the Dust became the first African-American woman to have a wide theatrical release of her feature film. In 2004, the Library of Congress placed Daughters of the Dust in the National Film Registry, where it joins a select group of American films preserved and protected as national treasures by the Library of Congress. Miss Julie Dash. Thank you so much. We are so excited for this conversation. And Jacqueline, please take it away.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Twinkie. Thanks for that beautiful introduction. And hi, Julie. We are so excited, honored to be with you. And I'm especially delighted that one of my favorite films of all time, Daughters of the Dust, is one of the films that's featured in the Women Make Film series that TCM is running for 14 weeks. So be sure to watch Daughters of the Dust tonight at 2:30 a.m. Eastern Time as part of the Women Make Film series on TCM. This is a series that is inspired by the really epic documentary by Mark Cousins called Women Make Film that really looks at the style and the visionary qualities of women filmmakers like you. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Jacqueline. It's always a pleasure. My pleasure to be here with you.
So maybe we can start off talking about your journey into becoming a director. How does a young woman growing up in Queensbridge housing projects, get into her mind that she wants to be a filmmaker?
Well, I really kind of just stumbled into it. I was in high school, and a friend of mine said, hey, let's go take this photography workshop in Harlem at the Studio Museum of Harlem, in Harlem. So I said, yeah, okay, I'll go. And I went by, and we were there for, maybe 2 weeks before we realized that the workshop was not about still photography, it was about cinematography. And that's how I stumbled into it. And, we had our wind up Bolex cameras. We had our upright moviola editing machines. We had the reel-to-reel editing benches. And it was just all very fascinating working with, sound equipment, Sennheiser mics and Nagra recording machines. And it was just very technical, very challenging. And I was up for it. And that's how I stumbled into it.
Wow, you are describing a pre-digital moment.
Yes, really pre-digital.
Yes. So many of us know you and your work in relation to the LA Rebellion. This is the term that's used to describe a group of filmmakers, including yourself, who studied filmmaking at UCLA. Your classmates and colleagues there, Charles Burnett, Haile Gerima, Barbara McCullough, Ben Caldwell, Zayda Davis, who came later, and so many others, really revolutionized not just Black images in film, but really redefined independent cinema in this country and around the world. Could you talk about your experiences in film school? I mean, you make your way out there.
Yeah.
Or through the AFI?
Well, actually, it began a little bit before then, because after the Studio Museum of Harlem, then I went to undergraduate school at CCNY, and I majored in film there. So we were making documentaries and experimental films, and I wanted to learn how to make dramatic films. And I was reading pamphlets about the Charles Burnett and Haile Gerima at UCLA. So I went out there with the intention of going to UCLA, but instead of getting into UCLA, first I got into the American Film Institute. So I spent 2 years there as a producing screenwriting fellow. But at the same time, while I was there, I was driving over to UCLA to kind of hang out with the filmmakers there. And I got to work on Larry Clark's film, Passing Through. And that's where I met Haile Garima and I met Charles Burnett in association with that film. And then 2 years passed, and then I went into the film department, graduate department at UCLA. But by that time, Haile Garima and Larry, they were graduating. They were already pretty much out. And I came in with Alila Sharon Larkin, Barbara McCullough, and Ofunmilayo Makara. Mm-hmm.
Incredible group of women. What was the environment like there? I don't think that this is a period of time, we're talking about the 70s, right? Like where we are imagining that film school is a really fertile environment for women filmmakers of color. So what was your experience at UCLA like in terms of developing your voice as a filmmaker?
Well, actually, I felt I experienced my freed self at UCLA because at the Studio Museum of Harlem, in undergraduate school, and also at AFI, I was not able to express myself the way I wanted to on film. Everyone had an agenda for me that I was not interested in it. So I had a series of films that I wanted to do, and I knew that I would to have access to the sound stages and to the equipment at UCLA. And I was able to just explore and experiment there. And since I had taken so many classes in film prior to graduate school, a lot of my classes were waived, So I experienced taking classes with Tashome Gabrielle, with Bob Nakamura, and with Jorge Prelorin. And like I said, it was my freed self. I was able to finish 4 Women that I actually shot just before I got to UCLA, I think. And 4 Women, Diary of an African Nun, Illusions. Often, everyone was supportive of each other's film and filmmaking process, whether they understood it or not. And that was a wonderful thing. So although I didn't have, let's say, professors, I was kind of under the radar because the films that I wanted to do, once again, I was not into doing the agitprop. I wanted to explore some other things. And so people just like, oh, she's doing her thing. And they were supportive, but at times, let's say, it was difficult because I wasn't really following the norm of what some of the other students there were doing at the time. Let's say that.
Okay, You say more about what you mean by that?
Well, for instance, with when I did 4 Women, people were like, well, what is that about? And then when I did Illusions, they were like, whoa. Because I had a character, the Mignon Dupree character, who is passing for white in order to rise up and become a studio executive. And prior to that, I guess the only reference most people had to any Black woman passing for white was they were passing for white because they were ashamed of being Black. This woman, this character, was not ashamed of being Black. She was simply passing for white because she was using it as a device to move forward and to learn all that she could in the industry. And some people were not appreciative of that. I say they because they associated that character with the old Hollywood trope of the tragic mulatto.
I see. Yeah.
And so there was some pushback on that after it was shot, and that's about it.
But you had to stand.
There was definitely pushback.
Yeah. Well, Illusion, this is your thesis film, right? At
Yes.
UCLA. And you just described the plot. One of the things that I appreciate so much about Illusions, it's a marvelous film, is that you set it in 1940s Hollywood. You have this character that's unlike any other kind of Black woman character that had been seen before, and I would say since, who um, passing for white, played by Lynette McKee.
Yeah.
Uh, and she is really trying to infiltrate Hollywood. She is trying to position herself so that she can tell stories that are meaningful, to get away from the kind of insipid entertainment or even racist entertainment practices of Hollywood studios. She gives this beautiful monologue at the end of the film about her intentions to stick with this industry and to have her voice heard, which really feels like when we watch it that we're hearing your voice, Julie.
That's what everyone says. Yeah, maybe it was. It was not intentional, but maybe it was. I'm going like, when people are saying, "Is that you speaking?" It was like, no, I was just writing that. It was like, hey,
Yeah.
perhaps.
One of the things that I've heard you say and other LA Rebellion filmmakers say is that being trained at UCLA meant that you were trained to be all around filmmakers, that you
Yes.
moved through all of the different aspects of filmmaking. And I was hoping you could talk a little bit about that, especially not just the different crew positions that you received training to do and what difference that has made for you as a director, but also that you're a writer and director.
My intention was always to perhaps just be a writer initially, but I became a director because someone had to direct it. And so it was the natural progression. I had stories to tell and to write, but I wasn't really planning even when I was at AFI, I was not planning to become a director. It just kind of happened. And I'm glad that it did. Well, I was trained as a filmmaker from the time I was at the Studio Museum of Harlem through undergraduate school to be a film technician, meaning I could assume any crew position, from whether it was sound recording to becoming a grip. I was never good as a gaffer because I'm always afraid of electricity, but we were trained in basic, electrical currents and all of that. But I would never tie in. No, I'm not a tie-in gaffer. We were trained, of course, to be cinematographers and all of those things. So this was very helpful for me early on when I began directing. And I would maybe have a camera person who would say things like, well, we can't use this setup because we need a wide angle lens and it will distort the scene. And I could be able to tell them, no, it will not. This is the lens that we're going to use. And they're like, oh, lenses? Yeah, I know lenses and I know lighting. And so that's kind of it's kind of a great thing, and also I guess a scary thing for some people, because even now I think I really do believe that, some production companies may not be that comfortable with me because they think that I might say, well, I'm not going to shoot this. I'm not going to place the camera here. I do have ideas about where I place my camera. And a lot of directors simply work with the actors. And I like to do a little bit of both. I like to work with the actors and the talent, as well as I have very specific ideas about the framing, the composition. I'm a terrible lighter myself, but I know the lighting that I want. And I think that may make some people feel uncomfortable. I've experienced that little hesitancy, and I say, well, let's put the camera back here and we'll shoot through there. And they'll say, no, we can't do that. And then later they'll come back and do it. But I was told by one camera operator, that cinematographer, that they're used to the directors working only with the actors. And I'm like, oh, but I'm a filmmaker. We do the whole thing.
Right. Right, right. Do you sense that there is some commentary on gender happening there when you get that feedback?
Well, sometimes, well, early on, there were gender issues, but now there are female cinematographers, there are female sound recorders, there are female, but there still is that kind of like thing about you need to stay in your lane. And I do understand and respect that, but also as director, I have choices that I'd like to establish and make manifest. And so, it just all depends on each film, each situation, whether it's television episodic or whether it's a feature film or whether it's a short or.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I definitely want to talk some about your television work. But before that, let's talk about Daughters of the Dust. And I think the things that you were just describing about your very particular aesthetic vision, your stylistic vision.
And I'm still learning. I think we're all learning it to the very end. I mean, it's just like with each production is different and you learn something new. I learned from different crew members. I learned from wonderful production designers that I've had, like Carrie James Marshall, who production designed Daughters of the Dust. That was wow. And from AJ, the cinematographer for Daughters of the Dust, who, created his little hand reflectors in various colors that he would use right off the frame of people and, got that beautiful lighting going for us.
Yes, absolutely. When Daughters of the Dust airs on TCM on September 22nd, that evening I'm in a conversation with Mira Nair, who speaks so eloquently about her love of Daughters of the Dust. And
she is one of my favorites. I love her work.
Well, you're one of her favorites too.
I love her work.
And the lighting is one of the things that she really spent a lot of time talking about. So I hope folks and you will join us
I will.
on the film. But let's talk about Daughters of the Dust. So this is a film that is set in 1902 on the Sea Islands of the South. So these are islands that are off the coast of South Carolina and Georgia. And as the film describes in its opening title cards, there is a really unique African American culture that has developed on the Gullah Islands. Your family has a background, the Geechee background that you have, championed so beautifully in this film. And tells the story of the family just as some members are about to embark on their trajectory of the Great Migration, which is not simply from the South to the North, but from what has been a really remote, maybe more deeply segregated environment into life on the mainland, right? So it's the mainland and it's the city, and we don't see them get there. We see these last days of their interactions and a kind of ceremonial experience that they have.
Kind of like a Last Supper,
saying goodbye. So Julie, could you talk about some of the things that came up for you when you were trying to develop this film? Because this was a long process for you. You spent more than 10 years developing Daughters of the Dust. Isn't that right?
Correct. Yes, I started writing Daughters when I was a student at AFI. And they quickly told me, well, that film has been done before. I said, I don't think so. Part of the reason I wanted to do Daughters of the Dust was because, I'm such a fan of foreign films. I love foreign films because they take me someplace that I've never been before, and I feel like I've been on a journey, and I don't know what's going to happen necessarily like you do with, films made here. You just know immediately, okay, this is boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy loses. With foreign films, you're not sure, So I wanted to do a film about African Americans that was authentic to our culture and this specific microcosm of our culture, So much that it was so much so that it was actually appeared to be a foreign film that people would think, where are we? Is this America? Yeah. So and that was kind of like the point, and that was kind of like what I was doing with Illusions, the thesis film about women in Hollywood. I was trying to create a world in this film where people watching it would not be sure, was this a film, a contemporary film made about a historical time, or was this made in 1942? So I like to play with things like that. So anyway, and we had at UCLA, we had studied so many films like made by African filmmakers, Latin American filmmakers, Asian filmmakers, and you could just feel the rich culture in their stories and in their films. And I just felt there was just so much lacking in films made about African Americans coming out of Hollywood at the time. It was always the same singular story, the same costumes, the same high cotton aesthetic. When really we know it was, like for the Sea Islands, it's rice culture and it's indigo. Everything was about the indigo processing. And down there, that really laid the foundation for the colonies, because it made the colonies so wealthy. Because when you think about it, every military uniform around the world, worldwide, is blue. And that comes from indigo.
Wow.
So yeah, it was pretty major. So I just started coming up with themes of, there was the color palette was this indigo, and then the white dresses, because I started studying old photographs from Sea Island, pictures, landscapes, and people within the landscape. And it was like, I have never seen an African-American woman in a white dress, an old Gibson girl dress. And so it was like 20 years past the Gibson girl style. And I was saying, well, this will work because they used to get hand-me-down clothing. So if I costume them in white dresses, summer dresses that are 20 years beyond their fashion nista time, then everything will be fine. But I got blasted about that. It's amazing the fragility that rises up whenever you show something that's new, that's something that people have not seen before. Certain people get just very, very anxious and angry, and I was saying, why are they wearing white dresses? Is she trying to create a Laura Ashley commercial? Why is this indigo? What is this with this dialogue? Why didn't she use subtitles? What is this with this Bilal Muhammad character, doing the call to prayer in the morning? Is she just trying to be trendy with the, oh yeah, I was attacked about him too. When all of these things are true and all of these things really happen, even though Daughters of the Dust is not like a biopic or about my family specifically, it is a compilation of events and issues and stories that happened around the time, including the Great Migration. And people even say, well, why are they leaving such an idyllic place? It's like, because it happened. That's a good question. Why are they leaving?
Yeah. And from what I understand, it wasn't just the kinds of reservations, complaints that you heard after the movie was released, but even when you were trying to share the script around,
yes,
people, potential funders, had a lot of difficulty understanding your vision, understanding what this narrative was about. People even felt that you should make a documentary first, and then maybe you could make a fiction film. I'm curious to know some of the ways that you managed to persevere when you were hearing so much discouragement across the process.
Well, the thing is this, I never really expected to be this Hollywood filmmaker director. So I just fell in love with the process, the films that were made before I was born, the films that were being made in, other countries since I was born. And just the fact that you could, reclaim a frame and place your story within that frame. That's what excited me. So when people were saying, well, you can't do it, it was like, oh yeah, sure, okay, bye. I really paid no attention to any of that because, I was, when I was at AFI, there were maybe one or two, it was Black directors that were above me in classes above me who thought that their intro into Hollywood would be to do a film, a white centralized figure film. And that didn't work. None of that ever worked. And I look at, how many directors there are, in the DGA Directors Guild, like 5,000, 6,000. Why am I trying to tell those stories when there are like 1,000 stories over here that have not been told before? And that are just as viable and interesting and compelling and engaging. And I want to tell those stories. And then after Daughters of the Dust, I was getting letters from sympathetic white people who would say things like, why are you limiting yourself to telling stories about Black women? It was like, limiting myself? I mean, there's a whole treasure trove of stories and events and issues and people to celebrate. But immediately they were saying why. It was like, oh, this is interesting. This is the psychology that needs to be, investigated. This is really strange.
Yeah, yeah. Films evoke lots of things in people. Yes. We learn that all the time. Mm-hmm. Julie, let's talk about when you were shooting the film. You shot the film on location. I mean, you had to bring equipment into an area that, it
was a protected area at that point because so we couldn't bring anything that had 4 wheels. So we had wheelbarrows to walk the equipment, a mile in towards the sand dunes. Mm-hmm. And we couldn't use lights or anything. We used reflectors. It was all shot with natural light. Mm. When we were down there, and I was location scouting, Hurricane Hugo hit. And the whole crew had to quickly caravan to Atlanta for a few days. And then we came back and some of our locations were altered by the fallen trees. I just included those fallen trees into the story. It was like, I think this works symbolically. So it was all right there for me to take advantage of and to exploit, really. The great look of the region has this Jurassic look.
Yes.
And that's really not what's shown when films about Southern culture and African Americans in the South is shown. It's always the same, I guess, greenery with someone playing a harmonica or banjo. And when I spoke to John Barnes, who composed the music, I said, I don't want one harmonica or banjo sound in this movie. This is not that. Uh-huh. Not today.
Thank you for that.
And he agreed. He did a wonderful job.
Yes. And instead, what John Barnes did in collaboration with you is to compose a score that really has a lot of layers in its influences. It's speaking to orishas, right? Like yes. It's connected to a whole kind of African cosmology.
Absolutely.
That don't explain, explicitly in the film, but it still comes through.
Oh, good. Well, because it's there. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You referred earlier to AJ, Arthur Jaffa, the cinematographer for Daughters of the Dust. Mm-hmm. Could you talk a bit about some of the ways that the two of you approach the visual style of the film?
Well, we always knew that it was like a collaboration between myself, Arthur Jaffa, and Kerry Marshall, because Carrie was living in LA at the time. So we used to sit around in my apartment on Tremaine Avenue, and we put our heads together about how could we show what's never been shown before. How we need to find references. And so some of the references came from, all of the references came from diasporic communities, African diasporic communities, like the Suriname rainforest even, or West African indigo processing plants, because we could not find any photograph of the actual indigo processing plants or pits or pots that were in the Sea Islands, but we know that they were there. So knowing that the people, the enslaved people who processed the indigo came from West Africa, we chose West African locations and duplicated those, that processing, those planting methods, the planting of rice with the heel and the toe, and all of these different tiny specifics that spoke directly to the influences of various West African ethnicities.
Wow. You talked about the dresses, the white dresses, your decision to cast a Black family that consists of a range of skin tones, the design of the hair in the film.
Yes, Pamela Farrell had a company called Cornrows Incorporated in Washington, D.C., and she came down and she did the hair and designed all the hairstyles.
Wow.
Pamela.
Wow. And I understand too that you guys talked a lot about what film stock to use for this film.
That was very important because unlike today with, digital filmmaking, that was chemical filmmaking. And with chemical filmmaking, it's not as easy. You just can't dial up the colors you wanted. So we knew that we're going to be dealing with a lot of dark skins in contrast to the white sands and to the white dresses. So we chose a German film stock called Aquavert. It's Aquavert negative, which is no longer available. And because we tested it and we knew that it had a lot of orange undertones in it, a lot of brown and orange undertones. And if we couldn't get enough of that, then we were going to use Fujifilm, because I shot 4 women on Fujifilm, which has a lot of yellow and brown undertones in it. We did not want to use Kodak film because Kodak film has a lot of blue undertones and blue and green. It reads shadow areas as blue and green. So the film stock was actually reading African Americans as blue and green, as shadows. And that's why the older films you see, everyone you can't see any distinguished features, you just see this blueness and this green. And we didn't want that. We tested extensively at UCLA, even prior to Daughters of the Dust, to get past that point, and we sorted it out. And even with AJ using his balancing his reflectors off the frame, right off the flame, to provide natural fill light into our actors' faces. Today, when I see on television, I actually was watching a limited series the other day and I turned it off because Shirley Chisholm was blue. And I just turned, I just can't. It's been sorted out, okay? There's no reason why dark-skinned African Americans have to look blue or green. No reason whatsoever.
Yeah, it still needs to kind of like permeate into the practice, right? To see even a group of, a range of skin tones in one shot, to see that not as a problem, but exactly that can be addressed.
Yeah. And I was shooting a film once. I was in North Carolina doing a movie the other week, and my cinematographer had a fit. He was trying to pull all the dark-skinned people out of the scene because he said he didn't have time to light them. He was like, no, we don't do this. We don't do this. And I know that, yes, if you put a dark-skinned person next to a light-skinned person, sometimes there can be a difference of 2 stops, especially if you're dealing with film, but you need to work it out. You need to plan for that. You need to come prepared for that. You know, it's sorted. I can't take it. I really can't take it where you cannot see the features of African Americans in a scene because they're worrying about blowing out the other actors around them. And, or they dial it up, you know, to boost the color, push the blacks on some other to make it look a certain way. And the African American character just falls to the wayside and turns blue. Mm-mm.
Mm.
Not unless we're talking about Watchmen. And it's a blue. He could be blue. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, you got motivation for it there. Yes, right. So Julie, Daughters of the Dust is just so innovative, so influential on so many levels in terms of its story, in terms of its visual style. And gratefully, it was restored by Cohen Media. You were able to finally, you know, get a version of the film that you really felt did justice to the negative that you shot.
Exactly, we did, you know, because we ran out of money, you know. We with American Playhouse, Lindsay Law was wonderful, but we just went off. We ran out of money. Each answer print was costing like $22,000, and so actually, what was shown at Sundance was not even a release print. It was an answer print. Like it was a step before a release print because we just couldn't get there. We just didn't have the money. Nowadays, filmmakers don't have to deal with that. They just, you know, dial it up in the post-production suite and, you know, get to the answer print, get to the correct color correction right away. The wonderful thing about Cohen Media was that they brought in AJ and for him to come in and color correct it. Ted Lanza at Cohen Media arranged it all, and it was just wonderful.
That's great. Yeah. The film then now people can get it on DVD and Blu-ray. It has
Blu-ray, yeah.
Circulating. Folks like me have been teaching Daughters of the Dust in our classes. It's been just a staple in any series on women filmmaking by women of color. And I'm curious to know what when you are engaging with audiences now who are experiencing the film. So many folks talk about just how influential it has been. Did you expect that this film would have that kind of like longevity, that it would still resonate with people so many years later?
No, I didn't. And you know, like my students, it's so funny. My students weren't even born when we shot the movie. No, it was just, Daughters of the Dust was just a process. It was the jumping off the starting point for, this is how we're going to be telling stories, our own stories. We're going to be telling them in various ways. They're not all of them are going to be structured like Daughters of the Dust. But this is my griot structure that I was using of recalling and recounting of family's history. And not all of them will look like Daughters of the Dust, because recently a producer asked me, well, I'd like to do a film, but can you do something other than the pastel look? And I'm going like, oh my God. Every film has its own color palette. Every film has its own look. Every film has its own texture, tone, and mood and sound. And I'm not going to be do Daughters of the Dust, Daughters of the Dust. That was 30 years ago that we were doing that. And I'm not trying to make any excuses or anything, except that producers need to understand that as filmmakers, we want to tell all kinds of stories. You know, Westerns, sci-fi, Afrofuturistic, and I actually, Daughters of the Dust is actually Afrofuturistic, but that term had not been coined yet. What we were talking about, what Carrie and AJ and I were talking about, was ancient to the future. What is ancient? What is future? How do we meld them, put them together, and make something, you know, with resonance that resonates with the audience.
Yes. And what you accomplished in Daughters of the Dust clearly was something that other Black women artists really appreciated. the level of detail, even if it's not about the pastels or the same look, something about the level of detail that you bring to rendering Black people on screen that, you know, catches the eye of other artists and has been the reason why they've specifically requested you when they've been working on projects. And I'm thinking here about some of the work that you've done for television.
Oh yeah, yeah, it was Alfred Woodard requested me for Funny Valentines, and it was wonderful, just wonderful working with her. And Angela Bassett requested me for the Rose Park Story. So it was as a direct result of seeing what they were, you know, those films that they said, oh, they knew that I'm not just going to be making the same film over and over. And I even did a movie for MTV original movies called Love Song. With Rachel True and Essence Atkins, which was really a lot of fun.
More recently, you have directed episodes of Queen Sugar.
Queen Sugar, yes, that was wonderful. That was the most relaxed, one of the most relaxed sets I've ever been on before. Relaxed and creative. Surrounded by creative women in every department. There were a few guys, few men, but it was mostly women, and it was really wonderful, you know.
Do you enjoy directing for television? Are there aspects of it?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, because it's fast. You know, so it's you know, it's fast.
Yeah. I just wondered if how it felt different to you, maybe working on things that you didn't write, if you experienced that differently.
Actually, it's a relief sometimes working on things that I haven't written, because I'm hearing the words, you know, spoken over and over and over that I've written, and you want to kind of do some revisions while you're shooting it. Now you can't do that, so it's actually more relaxing to work with someone else's writing at times, you know.
That's really interesting. And when you talk about the relaxed atmosphere and the world of women working on,
yeah, it was something, you know. It was, you know, Ava DuVernay really created a remarkable paradigm for people to follow, and to have all these women working in different departments and you know, collaborating, and it was good. And the actors are just so warm and inviting. I mean, you know, there was no pushback, and you know, because I've heard some horror stories about, you know, episodic TV, but that was not it at all.
Wow. Did you see that experience as a sign that things are opening up for women in productive ways in the industry? I mean, how do you think about what the prospects are for women filmmakers now?
Well, I see just from reading the rolling credits that more women are directing, and I know a whole ton of women, everyone coming off of Ava DuVernay's Queen Sugar has been directing multiple episodes of different television shows. I mean, so she's put so many different people in the DGA that, I mean, she's literally changed the face of the Hollywood arena that hadn't changed in over 100 years. She just banged. She went in there and just did it. And now women are directing. More and more and more. It doesn't even seem unusual now.
It shouldn't seem unusual. And that's one of the things I think is so illuminating about Mark Cousins' documentary, Women Make Film, that we're airing on TCM. He's showing us that there were women filmmakers in the first decade of filmmaking, and there have been women filmmakers for 120 years. And if we can take that edge of surprise off of this and just understand women filmmakers.
Surprise and resentment and thinking, oh, can they handle the pressure? Can they do it? Of course we can.
Yeah. Well, we should bring Twinkie back, because I think that there are some questions from viewers. If you're...
I'm up for them. Yes, let's do it.
Here she comes.
I'm here. Hi. Oh my goodness. Oh, this was a great conversation. I'm really excited about it because I learned a lot. Even though she's my mentor, I still learned a lot more about her. And so thank you very much, Jacqueline. And there are a lot of answers, a lot of questions that you already answered in your wonderful conversation. So I just have two little questions and then one small statement. So
Okay.
one question is about Yellow Mary.
Mhm.
It's a Yellow Mary question about her journey. Can you talk about Yellow Mary's journey a little bit?
A little bit or a lot bit. How
Okay.
deep you want me to go?
Well,
You mean Yemoja, the goddess of water, who is symbolic of a liminal state of being because she
okay.
arrives on water and not via earth. That part, the anthropological part, or Yellow Yemoja. Yeah. Yellow Mary is a woman of independent means, the character. And in my research, the only way I could find African American woman at the time being a woman of independent means was her being a sex worker. Women did not travel alone. So we have two sex workers coming to say hello and goodbye to Yellow Mary's family while they're en route to Nova Scotia, which is the last stop on the Underground Railroad. Wow. So there's a lot there. Yes.
Oh, wow. That's okay. There is a lot there. That's amazing. And a question came in about the parasol. What is the significance of the parasol?
Well, women carried parasols to keep the sun off them, right? So, parasol. Oh, the big parasol that they were sitting beneath on the ocean.
Yes.
Okay, that we purchased it new, and Carrie James Marshall distressed it. He did a wonderful job. When I looked at it, I said, "Wow, this thing is kicking." The parasol for me is a reflection or symbolic of the flotsam and jetsam from the mainland that comes by via the ocean to the islands. They had very little interaction with the mainland.
Yes.
This arrived by the waves.
Yes. Yes.
Flotsam and jetsam, and they were like, "Oh, even though it's torn up, we can use it." Yeah.
That's
Bouclage, as in found objects turned into useful objects.
Yes, that's awesome. Thank you for that answer. I remember the first time that I watched it, I was watching the film with my then husband, and we were watching it, and I understood everything, and he understood nothing. He's a New Yorker. My family is from North Carolina, and consequently, I learned that my family was from the islands, the Jekyll Islands specifically.
Oh man, yeah.
So I had no idea. But
that's because people hid it in their growing up in New York. We would celebrate the fact that we were Gullah Geechee, but my grandmother would tell me, "Don't you ever let anyone call you a Geechee," because it was considered a pejorative term. It was in terms of the hierarchy of the world. You have African Americans. What's lower than an African American? A Geechee.
Yeah.
So that's why my company is called Geechee Productions, Geechee LLC, because I took that and it turned it in. We have to reframe things.
That's right. James Brown, from what I'm to understand, is Geechee, his Gullah background.
So is Michelle Obama.
And you can almost kind of see it in their face and in their features, and you can almost see it. So when I think back to it, when I was watching it and I understood everything that was happening, and my husband was like, they're not even speaking English. I was like, it sounds so clear to me. I'm so clearly understanding. So I had to call my grandmother then, she was still with us, and ask her about it. And then she gave me the whole rundown, and I was like, oh
my God, Jekyll Island, you were right out there. And that's where Roosevelt and all of them built their mansions. Carnegie Mellon, they had mansions on Jekyll.
Really? Oh, see, I have so much more to learn, and I'm very excited about it. I'm really, really thankful. I don't want to keep you with all of the questions that I have, because I can actually call you whenever. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you, Jacqueline and Julie, for being here. We're
Thank
so grateful to have the opportunity to delve into all of this today.
you.
And to those of you at home, thank you for watching. And don't forget to check out Women Make Film on TCM every Tuesday evening, beginning at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. To learn more, visit tcm.com/Women Make Film. Julie, Jacqueline, thank you so much again from all of us at Alliance of Women Directors. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for having me.